Okay, today we're going to allow other users to become members of our website so that we can then allow them to add comments and potentially upload stories of their own, depending what we want to do. So over in the sidebar, I put a little link called Become a Member. That's pretty easily written, just a simple link, but I have, it's a link to index.php, subject equals create, and user equal new is what I put in as the get parameters for that link. Now, when it actually goes through index.php and it looks and it finds the subject equal to create, it calls create and sends as a parameter $ARR. I haven't really discussed exactly how that works, but in a different area of the index.php, if ARR or if you've sent all your stuff as get, it sends the whole get array. Now, as you can see in the main line, if you've sent all your stuff as a get, then the get array is sent to a function called the page. If, on the other hand, you had sent everything as post, then it would send the post array. So either way, by the time I get to the page function, we have a $ARR. So if it finds a subject equal to create, it sends that whole array to the create array. Now, the create array begins with, well, if user equals new, then it's going to get the new user info. That new user info is going to have a form, and on that form, I've got a little special thing called onSubmit equals return, validate, and in parentheses this. I'll explain what all that is in a little bit, but this essentially is the form itself. Validate is a JavaScript function. I haven't written that yet. The rest of the form won't be terribly different. It's got a username, your email, and I might have a heading like become a member, add comments, all that kind of stuff. I'll throw in my password, and of course I want them to confirm the password to make sure that is that they've written it correctly. And first name, last name, that kind of stuff. I've also got to add in an input type equals hidden, name equals subject, value equals create. Because if I don't add that, then it won't get back into the create function. Anyway, this validate form, what that is just JavaScript in my functions.js. And the first thing I want to do is check for that it has a proper email address, that is a properly formatted one. I won't know if the email address works or not, but at least it has to have an @ symbol. It has to have at least a period somewhere in the second half of it to the right of the @ symbol. So you can search and you can find various code, examples of valid emails and invalid emails. If you think about that, you have to have something to the left of the @ symbol. You have to have something to the right of the @ symbol. There has to be at least one dot to the right of the @ symbol. And there's got to be something to the left and right of each of those dots. So anyway, they have a little string that you can validate against. So this string, I called it valid email, and it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you start looking at it a little more closely. What it says here is initially you have to use things like A to Z, capital or lowercase, and 0 to 9 or an underscore. And then you can have things like a period or a dash in your name, but you don't have to have them, but they are allowed. And then you have to have a plus sign, that is to say you add to that whole string the @ symbol, which you must have. And then you can also have A to Z, 0 to 9, and dash and all that, but you also then have to have a dot in there somewhere. And you have A to Z, 0 to 9, but it can be between 2 and 4 characters. So that's your two-digit country code or your 4-digit like .info or whatever. So that's what it's actually doing. So when you say this, you say, all right, well, I'm going to send the form. That is, I'm sending whatever that form was that I called it, then get info. I'm going to send that form to this function, and it's going to say, it's going to take that valid email string, and it's going to test it against the form.username.value. So whatever the value was I put in for the email address, it's going to test that and see whether it's true or not. and you see I have an exclamation point in front of valid email, so it's not. So if it's not true that that matches or conforms, then I'm going to put some code, else some other code. And obviously, ultimately, what it comes down to is I'm going to return false or I'm going to return true. But before I return false, I'm going to send a little alert, hey, you need a valid email address, and I'm also going to have the form.username.focus, which will put the cursor right back into that text field. So you'll see if I type an incorrect email address, it says you need a valid email address, and a little form pops up. Now, assuming I have it correct, I'm going to insert a new user info. And there I'm sending an ARR, and I happen to have it lowercase just for no reason at all. But I'm going to take all that data that would have been sent by the post method, all of that, I'm going to get a username, password, a confirmed password, the first name, last name, and so on. And I'm going to test it against an existing user function that I haven't shown you yet. That will test whether or not the user already exists in the system, because you can't create a username that already exists. And assuming you haven't stopped at that point in time, assuming that you get past that, I probably would do something else besides exit, but assuming you get past that, then I'm going to test whether your password is equal to your confirmed password. They have to both be true, and you have to not be an existing user. And if that's the case, then insert into site users, username, password, all that kind of stuff. Just going to insert it, MD5 your password, and get the result. At which point, you've now been entered, and one of the things that I did is in this example is I said, okay, click here to continue, although I don't necessarily need to do that, but I will. A site member create a new site user with that username, password, first name, last name, and notice guest. So that's what you are, at least initially. And serialize that and create a session variable. Now the existing user function, it begins with the assumption that valid is true, but says select username from site users, where the username is whatever you've given it as the parameter, and the result. And if MySQL num rows of the result is equal to 0, then valid is false. So I just set up very simply, said, okay, let's assume it's true, but if there's 0 for the num rows, then it's false, and return whatever that value is. What would happen is, at that point, it would immediately return to, you'd be logged in, and you would be able to add comments on the right side of the article once you're logged in. So that add comment is something that only shows up if you're a session, if you have a valid member.